heading to Colorado this week, but we didn't have much time to really plan for anything. So I literally think we're just booked places to go, and we're going to get out there and be like, what do you want to do?
You should. Do you guys like horseback riding?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I haven't done it since I was like
Horseback riding in the
16.
mountains is amazing.
That would be cool. That would actually be a lot of fun. We looked into zip lining.
Oh, yeah.
Crazy expensive for 5 people.
Yeah, it is. We went, let's see, we did 4 people because Tess couldn't do it. So Lisa stayed with Tess, but it was great. I mean,
Was
you're
it
just
scary?
ziplining down in
Was it
the
scary?
mountains. No, I mean, you go like tower to tower. So you go boo, boo, boo.
Yeah,
boo.
yeah.
I think there were 5 towers. And you can go really fast. I went so much faster because I weigh so much more than my kids.
Yeah.
I would go, and then all of a sudden, I'm like 50 yards in front of them, and I just turn around and go, hey. It's awesome.
Is it really high up?
Like the line?
Yeah.
I
Like
would
some of these
say-
go over like really big ravines, and that kind of freaks me out.
You know the gondolas for skiing?
Yeah.
You're up that high.
Oh, okay.
40,
That's-
50, 40
yeah.
feet? I mean, if you
if
fell,
you fell, it would hurt.
oh yeah, you'd break some
You could
stuff.
die.
Yeah. But it's not like you're going to fall 1,000 feet into a ravine or anything like that.
Some of them, it's like you can pick the extreme level of what you want to do.
Yeah.
We'll see. All right. Well, Daniel, here we are
maybe
again.
you need to unlearn fear of heights.
Dude, we don't have to point out my fears. This podcast isn't about
That's
my
the
fears.
worst segue ever.
Was that an intro? Were we doing the intro there?
I was
We'll go with it. Larissa, good luck editing that intro.
Yeah.
Where to cut in on that one. It's good to be back with you, Dan.
Absolutely. It's good to be here. I'm looking out this big window right now. It's lovely.
I love windows. I natural light. It's the best.
It is. I agree.
Daniel,
Yes.
we are, you know what, we should look at what was the date? Do you remember the date that we decided to go remote when COVID? We were coming back from Georgia.
Yep. I'll look it up right now. I think it was March 18th.
It's been 155 days.
Mm-hmm.
155 days of not being in the Crema office in the Crossroads Arts District of Kansas City.
It's really quite sad. You've driven down there quite a few times, haven't you?
Not many. 4, 3, to pick up some stuff, to check on a couple things.
Yeah. Checking mail, looking for, just checking our inboxes and mailboxes and stuff like that. Yeah. It's, there's a lot of buildings down there that are
Empty.
For lease, empty.
Yep. And it was strange to be in the space because it was just completely frozen in time, as if we were just there like last week.
I know.
Things
you
are
felt
dusty.
like you were investigate, like you had just like The Walking Dead had just happened, and you went up and you're like, I wonder what people were doing when the apocalypse hit.
Yep.
It really does feel that way. It looks that way.
We had we have a really expensive, I think I said this on a previous episode, we have a really expensive coffee kettle for water.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. I have the same one at home, and it's I love a good coffee kettle.
Love this kettle.
But we left water in it. And when I thought, oh, it's going to be gross, it's going to be stinky. And it wasn't, it was fine. The water was clean, but the kettle had been there long enough. It had started to rust. This brand new, it was a fairly new kettle, and we hadn't had that long. And it was just weird to think like everything was still frozen in time, that the coffee water that we had brewed coffee with was still sitting in there as if like we had just done it a few days before, but it actually had been there long enough to start rusting the kettle. And things were kind of dusty. Oh yeah. We'll rust during pandemic.
Do not leave water in. We'll rust during pandemic. Yeah. Because we didn't know. We needed to empty it if we were going to be gone for 6 months, a year.
Cost that much. It's true. I remember asking for that. Anyways, during this time, this 155 days, I have felt, and I want to see what you think. I have felt these phases, and people talk about the ups and downs, of course, the loneliness and then the stress, but I feel like there's been these phases of awareness, if you will, through the pandemic. And we've been blessed that businesses stayed steady, relatively speaking. We did have a dip, but then we've had work for people. We didn't have to do any major layoffs. So we kept working. We were still busy. So there was different phases that we went through. And then kind of the question is where are we now? Not necessarily from a business perspective, but just maybe where are we at with how we're approaching where we're at now. So I want to walk through first what at least some of the phases that we've described, and they'll be different for different people, and maybe the duration was different, but I want to see, do these land with you? Did you feel the same thing?
Yep.
My first stage was twofold a bit. It was both crisis management and also an extremely high sense of creativity. I was the most satisfied in my job the first, we'll call it 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks during the pandemic that I had been in a long time at Crema.
Why is that?
I just had a purpose. Like I had a project. I had a big problem to solve. I didn't know how I was going to solve it, but it was like, we have something to work on. I was working more hours, which just, it's going to sound bad. It kind of felt good to be like, I got to buckle down and we got to work hard to figure this out. I don't know that I was actually doing anything that productive, but that was the mindset I had. And it was it
was novel.
Yeah. It was satisfying.
And it wasn't just something that you were going through. Like there's a difference between...
There was a shared experience. Yeah.
Like your own crisis is not that fun. But a shared crisis that all of humanity is going through and everyone's going through the same thing.
Yeah. Which I feed off of the interactions with other people. And I felt like I was talking to more people than I ever had because we were all like Zooming each other and calling each other and texting each other. You good? And everything. Yeah. How's it going? Like there was just this like vibe.
Yeah. And there was drama and it was okay.
Yeah.
And it was like okay to be dramatic because everybody else was being dramatic too.
Right. And there was a lot of forgiveness.
Did you see the stats? Yeah. Did you see the stats? What are we going to do? Yeah. I don't know. I mean, all of that kind of felt a little good.
Yeah. And clients had a lot of grace. We had a lot of grace with our employees. There was just a lot of like, we're all in this. As long as we're not dying, literally, we're okay. So let's figure out how to be gracious with this whole shift. We're working from home. We got kids. Some of us are sick, whatever. How do we deal with it? So it felt like the world just came together. People were out walking their dogs. We were like, look at all the people in the neighborhood. Like you can see them.
I met Joe today. Who's Joe? I don't know, but he's lived
my neighbor
for 6 years.
Yeah, right. I met my neighbors during that time. Right. So much goodness came in that first season. All right. That waned a bit.
It did.
And you ran out of...
It's like buying a new car after 6 months. Like it doesn't even smell new anymore.
I'll buy McDonald's and eat it in there.
That's right. How'd that French fry
get? Then it turned to a little bit of the endurance and survival. Like, oh man. We got to do this now.
We got to keep getting through it. When will we be able to go back to the office?
Yeah. And I think there was a big question. Like we thought, you just mentioned it. We thought it was only going to be 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Like the pandemic's going to go away in 2 weeks. Ignorance is bliss. Then it was like, well, maybe 6 weeks. Yeah, maybe 2 months.
Yeah. Now,
and then
12.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah.
Whatever it'll end up being. So we recently told the team we're not going back until after the end of the year, or we'll reevaluate basically 2021. Right. The offices are still there. We have a long-term lease, so we're still paying rent, but we're saving money on all the other utilities and things. But everybody's got a desk. Everybody's got their gear. We're all set up. We're in a good spot. But now it's like, this is now business as usual. This is the usual. This is now we're back in the rut.
This is not a rut I want to be in. Don't get me wrong. There are ruts that are healthy. Healthy eating, exercise, reading, learning. Those are all great ruts to have your entire life.
Good habits.
That's right. This is not a rut I want to be in.
Yeah. I feel
not
that.
all ruts are equal.
This is a negative rut, or at least it feels like that. I mean, it's not to say that we're not maybe more efficient. Mm-hmm. It's not to say that we aren't still being creative in certain aspects, but it is not the same. Mm-hmm. And it's now naming the fact that it's not going to be the same for a long time, if ever. Mm-hmm. So now we're in this rut. So the question I wanted to bring up is this idea of unlearning. Now, we were forced to unlearn what we assumed was the only way to work, which was most of us in the office, a few people remote, but take advantage of the space, let the serendipity happen. Mm-hmm. Although I kind of hate that term, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
Let the serendipity happen. It was great.
So I'm curious to hear from you. What are some things, first off, that you were forced to unlearn? And what are things that now that we've decided we're not going back to the office anytime soon, now what should we be thinking about unlearning going forward?
Yeah. I think that's the main question there, because personally, I don't think I had to unlearn much. I had to learn a lot of new things. A ton of new things, and things that I thought that I'm like, I'll get back to these. I had to put on a shelf. Now it's almost like I have to unlearn things, temporary things, ruts.
What's something you had to let go of is maybe a better way to say it. I think it's this idea of
routine, just normal routine. That was based off of the people in my life. And I think that's the underlying thing that's really messing with a lot of people. And I'll own this, is that, so if you start a new job and you get a really cool, workspace at a really cool building.
Yep.
So at Crema. So you start at Crema.
Best company in the world.
Absolutely. You're in the same seat for 2-3 years. That's an okay rut, because you're in a space with other creative people.
You're
interacting
safe
with the community.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You can move, you can get up and walk. There's routine around that. You come into a situation to where it's 5 months of this. What's absent is human interaction, in my opinion.
In the same way, at least.
Yeah. And the knowledge, hopefully, hopeful knowledge that it's temporary, but because it's temporary and it lacks human interaction.
Yep.
That's what makes it hard, in my opinion, is that I don't know when it's going to end. I know it's temporary, so I'm hopeful, but I don't know how. I don't have an end date. And because I don't have an end date, I don't know when I'm going to get to interact with those people that are important to me from a work standpoint. That's hard. And that's been hard.
I don't know what's never going to be the same. Even this idea of we'll go back, we'll eventually get back. Yeah, but it's not going to look the same. It won't be exactly how it was before, which we always say is good. If we always say, then if in the next 2 years, Crema still looks the same as it did 2 years ago, we're probably irrelevant.
So to answer your question, I think I had to unlearn some communication habits.
Okay.
So I think that this experience forced me to have a better mental checklist of, have I communicated to all the people I needed to?
Yeah, you didn't assume people knew just by proximity.
Exactly, which is normally you can't assume that. I mean, when you're in a space like ours with people, it's like, oh, I communicated. Oh, I need to talk to this person. Well, I'll just go knock on their desk real quick and be like, hey, FYI, this is what's happening, or this is the decision that's been made. You can't do that anymore. So I had to unlearn. It's like, oh man, I'm totally missed the ball on communicating these things to these people. So I had to have a better mental checklist on making sure that I was over communicating so that I could learn a new habit. And I don't think I'll unlearn that. I think I'm going to keep that. I'm going to keep that. So that was so I had to unlearn some other communication habits because of this. So for me, that's been the biggest.
I think I would agree. I think asset creation kind of goes alongside that. The need to create artifacts of things that shared and make them
and where do you share them?
Yeah, right. Make them extremely accessible, extremely referenceable. And we're still working on that. We still haven't completely figured that out. Like we use Confluence for some things. I hate Confluence. We use PaperDoc for some things. I like paper. We use Google Docs for some things. We put some things on our website. We have some things in Rippling that are PDFs. We have things in our, and that's okay. We're still kind of figuring out where those things live, and eventually they'll live someplace, and that we'll get there.
Yep.
But that's been hard to remember. Oh, they weren't on that Zoom call. Let's make sure that we have a follow-up, or there's a recording of that thing. There's, how do you make sure you have an artifact or an asset?
Yeah. So I think that's so these are good examples of things that you unlearn because either they're not helpful anymore or maybe you were wrong. But then there's also things that you had to learn just because you were in a situation where it's like, I have to do this. It's temporary, but I have to do this. So when we get back to the office, I'm sure there's old habits that I want to bring back that I haven't used before. Yeah. Old routines. The way
what's going to be weird is our brains, even that far removed in time, are going to go, well, I'm just going to walk over to my desk and I'm going to sit down. I'm going to grab my coffee the same way I used to. I'm going to go talk to Tyler the same way, it's that's just going to work. We so easily could go right back to it.
Absolutely. And
whether we should or shouldn't.
Yeah. And it's not strange as in like uncomfortable. It's just strange because it's interesting that I'm going to say this, that it's novel now to see people, like we had a supply drive for a nonprofit that we supported, and going down there and seeing people for the first time, it was so good, but it was just like, well, this is kind of awkward.
I know.
I haven't had a face-to-face conversation with people other than my kids and my wife and a few friends for a long time.
Yeah.
And
you're afraid of them too. That's weird too.
Yeah. So that's a really good point too. It's just like, there's this stigma of like,
I can't shake your hand. I can't hug you. I can't.
That's right. If someone accidentally, coughs into their arm, it's like, I feel like all eyes go to them. It's like, you just coughed. That.
Do you remember the first time you experienced that when in the airport?
Yeah, that was awful. It had just been announced, like how many, the NCAA tournament, travel, and a few other things that were huge that had never happened.
Game changers. And I remember we were at dinner and it was like, this is all everything's changing. Yeah. I'm freaking out. And people are like, it's no big deal. It's just, it'll pass. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And then we got in the airport and you were like, coughed. You had a cold.
I either coughed or sneezed into my shirt. And I came up and I swear there were at least 2 or 3 people looking at me that thought I was a pariah. I mean, it was just
crazy.
Evil eyes. And I thought, oh my God, this is just the start. This is just the start of this,
And really that fear, although it subsided in certain ways, is still there, and it will be for a long time. I think, there's been there will be lots of studies on the psychological effects of both the isolation, the fear of contact, the fear of being able to be close to somebody again, to build new relationships. How many new couples were not formed in this time because, dating is harder, like there's so many far reaching aspects of this.
That's a really interesting point.
But I don't want to get stuck too much on like just the pandemic aspect of this unlearning. I think that what this idea brings up is this concept of unlearning. In our last episode, we talked about curiosity. And I think it is coupled with that in some ways, of being willing to say, is there something that maybe I need to let go of, or I'm willing to let go of, that will free me up to do even better work or different work or focus on something else or whatever. You and I have always said that we want to replace ourselves. And so we've had to unlearn over and over and over again. When you stopped doing project management, you had to unlearn like, oh, well, my ritual is to go do the PM work. When I stopped designing, I had to unlearn like, oh, well, my default is just to open up design software. Same thing with strategy, et cetera. There's where I kind of first heard this term of unlearning was from Reid Hoffman on his podcast. Which one's his podcast? Oh my gosh. not how I built this. It's Masters of Scale. Thank you.
Yeah.
Almost lost it there. So he talks about the fact that, so Reid Hoffman is the founder of LinkedIn. He's also an investor at Greylock Investments. He says that successful people need to hone the skill of unlearning, which I think would be coupled with that curiosity. Like I'm curious about maybe a different way of doing things. In the context of what he says is unlearning is the act of recognizing that the factors responsible for past success don't necessarily guarantee new wins.
Right.
And I think we do this where we say, and we even struggle with this, a recent conversation with our leadership team, it was like, we have our processes down. The way we do our work is what makes us successful. Then the challenge is to say, well, what if the way we did our work changed? Or what is there something about the way that we do our work that needs to change? Are we willing to make that change to see the potential of taking on new work or new opportunities or new leads that maybe we would have never even entertained had we not been willing to maybe change the processes that we're so comfortable in?
Yeah. I think you see a lot of great examples of this. I love that definition of past successes don't necessarily guarantee new wins, because things change whether you want them to or not, and you have to modify. So I think there's different levels and granularity of unlearning. Some things you need to unlearn and just completely get out of your life because they're just bad habits.
Yeah.
They're just not healthy. They're not good for you.
You should unlearn how to do heroin.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Or, you've got some rhythms in your life that are just, unhealthy changes, or the way you maybe talk to a certain person or whatever. It's like, you need to unlearn that. That's right. You need to get rid of that. But athletes do this all the time, especially as they age. It's like the way you played the game the last 5 years, we need to change it a bit because it's not going to lead to as much success as you saw.
Yeah.
Whether that, the greatest pitchers, golfers, they all have individual coaches, and they're constantly modifying their swing. And if you think about that, they build so much muscle memory that the technique they've done over the last 5-6 years.
Yeah.
That's incredibly difficult, but they have to do it, or because it's either a new way, it's a new technique, and they're curious. It's like, a new process for us. It's a new technique for them.
Yeah, right.
And they have to change. Yeah.
The Power of Habit has a lot of sports reference, the book Power of Habit. And one of them, and I was just like, really? Is it like this? And you've played football, so you'll maybe better understand.
The Tony Dungy one, right? With the Indianapolis Colts.
Where they watch the left foot of the person across from them. And it's like all they focus on is how that person pivots their foot. And then the rest of their entire massive body movement is based off of just how that person leads with their left foot or something like that.
Right. Yeah. Or think of
that's all they're allowed to think about.
Yeah. Or think of football coaches that have an aging team, still fantastic athletes.
Yeah.
But as quarterbacks get older, they're just not as fast, or running backs aren't as fast. They lose a step. And so they have to change offensive schemes, or what they normally, a lot of times they trade that player and then, they get a younger one. But still, there's a lot of unlearning habits. And so even exercising as a lay person, the older you get, it's like, man, I probably need to switch up. I'm not going to leave my rut of exercise.
Yep.
But I'm going to learn either a new technique, maybe a new type of fitness, change it up a little bit, which is still unlearning. I'm still going to stay in this rut because it's a good one, but the way it looks is going to be different. Or, you having eggs every morning.
I love
give up that rut. You should.
No, it's a good rut to have. It's my favorite food.
Yeah. And so I think what Reid Hoffman, which I love, is just this aspect of like what we talk a lot about is just adaptation.
Yeah.
Is there a new way to do it? Don't be fully set in stone that you're not willing to be curious enough to investigate. Is there a better way? Has someone come up with a better way to do it? Yep. Be curious enough. And if it is better, be willing to unlearn your old stuff to learn the new stuff.
This is hard though.
It is.
I've worked, I want to be careful here. I'm going to tread lightly on this topic. What I have found is that we as we've hired primarily, especially as we started and as we've grown, we've hired people right out of college or maybe some of their first stages of career.
Mm-hmm.
And what's awesome is they don't have much to unlearn because everything's new. Right. The only thing that they maybe need to unlearn is that they're no longer in an academic setting.
Mm-hmm.
And so one, risks have impact now, but also you are no longer going to be mandated through curriculum what to do.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to figure out what to do. And at least in our culture, we're not going to micromanage your every assignment.
Mm-hmm.
So there is some unlearning there. As people progress in their career in age, in general, just purely by what I think we talked about, just how many birthdays have you had?
Yeah, how many birthdays have you had? Mm-hmm.
There often is the case, not always, it's not mutually exclusive, but as you get older, there's a feeling of like, I know how to do this. I've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
I'm the best at doing this, and you should respect the experience that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And what ends up happening is that I remember when people used to complain about millennials? Like there was all this stuff written about hiring millennials is the worst thing you can possibly do. They're lazy, they're entitled, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, there was some truth to pieces of that, but I struggled because part of me was like, you know what I really have a hard time hiring is people that have been in the industry for a long time.
And they're set in their ways.
Mm-hmm. They're not willing to say, it's my way or the highway, or maybe I could rethink the way that I approach this, or how might we, back to our previous episode, how might we think a little different?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really difficult because if you have spent your career being told, doing a good job, don't stop changing. That's it. Win.
Good work.
Yeah, keep up the good work. And oh, by the way, once you earn your stripes, you can tell other people what to do. Right.
Yeah.
We created a system through efficiency that said, oh, the control is power, is influence. But the people that are willing to unlearn to say, well, maybe it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if I give some autonomy, maybe if I give people purpose, they'll do better work.
Mm-hmm. This is the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that we've been forced to deal with that through the pandemic.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If I could encourage my kids with, here are the traits, that you need to walk into your first interview with, you need to show that you're committed, but you're willing to adapt.
Yeah.
You're willing to be agile enough to investigate, ask questions, be willing to change. Again, you can be committed and all in and loyal, and be adaptive and being able to change at the same time. It's not binary.
Sounds a lot like humble confidence.
To say that you're curious does not mean that you won't commit to something.
Yeah.
There's a difference between being curious and flighty.
Yes.
A complete difference.
Or timid even.
Yeah, exactly. You can be curious, but it doesn't mean curious people don't necessarily have ADD or ADHD.
Right.
They ask a lot of questions and they're curious about a lot of different things. And maybe they have the capacity to hold it all together. That doesn't mean they're flighty.
And if anything, honestly, most entrepreneurs that I know do actually have like clinical ADHD, and like it gives them this curiosity to just want to unlearn and learn all the time, which actually I think is an asset for them. It means that they're not willing to say, well, it's always worked that way, I'm not going to change. It's like, well, I'm distracted enough that I'm going to go try this other thing, even if it may or may not work. And so it actually becomes a little bit of a secret power.
Right.
Which I think is interesting. But it does, I think one of the last points that he does talk about, Reid Hoffman talks about, is that it does take humility. Mm-hmm. It takes being humble enough to say, okay, the way I've done it all my life, my entire life, I'm willing to give that up in lieu of maybe a potentially better way or a different way.
Yep.
And it might benefit me. It might benefit the people around me, my team, or my organization, or even my industry. And that shift, again, we were forced to do it through a pandemic. We were forced to think about going remote, working collaborative, considering everybody where they are, et cetera. maybe having more grace than we've ever had to have. Mm-hmm. But then the question is for us now moving forward, what will be the things that we really have to carefully continue to consider? Maybe we shouldn't do that. It's back to that question that you asked at the coffee shop. What's something we should give up? What's something we should stop doing? I think it's a question you and I should ask ourselves at least a couple times a year. Mm-hmm. Is there something we're doing now, albeit even good? Mm-hmm. It could be a great thing that we should probably kill pretty soon in lieu of doing something that will even be better.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because those things, even if they're good, can be like, that might be a hindrance to our next.
That's it.
Because maybe it's good just because it feels good, because it feels comfortable.
I'm terrified of that.
It's like,
I am.
We shouldn't go over there because it looks just really uncomfortable.
Right.
I can't see what's over there. This is really safe. It's moving
it's risky too, right? Mm-hmm. So for us as business owners, there is a risk in doing something like that, because what it might put at risk is the organization,
right?
The business model, the livelihoods of all the people that work for us. Mm-hmm. But it might actually be something where if we do make that risky decision and we push something and ask people to trust us and maybe push into it with us, that all of a sudden you've got this opportunity that gets unlocked. It's like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know like that we could be doing that.
So I think for our listeners, the takeaway I would say is use a question to kind of maybe help guide the habits, the routines, the areas of your life that you need to unlearn. Is what should I start doing, stop doing, and keep doing?
Yeah.
I think that's a great question to just ask.
Start doing, stop doing,
and keep doing.
Because
keep doing, it's like, well, this rut is working great and it's great. Keep doing it.
Yeah.
I need to start doing this because I'm not going to get here. Great. Start doing it. Or what do I need to unlearn? What do I need to stop doing? So start, stop, and keep.
And don't assume that just because something's good, that it's something you need to keep. Mm-hmm. Be willing to even give up the good things. Because we want to assume, well, yeah, of course, give up the bad things.
Right.
Things that are hurting or they're not going well. That's obvious.
Right.
But maybe it's something that worked. It worked really well. You won. You were successful because of it in the past. Mm-hmm. But you're willing to say, no, it doesn't work anymore.
Yep.
Or maybe it's not going to work in the future, so I'm going to get ahead of it.
Yep. It's worked so far, but it may not be the thing that you need to do in the future.
Yeah. So I think this kind of both touches on a posture of unlearning, but also actually I think it's more of a discipline. That's it. Yep. This takes action to make happen.
Oh yeah. Yep. Or else you just won't do it.
That's it. All right. So if you have something that you're unlearning right now, send us an email, option5@crema.us. And I don't think we've ever actually gotten an email, just as a side note. I'm just going to call it out, guys. You don't follow through. If you listen to the episode this far, just shoot us an email.
We'll respond.
I'll look at it at least. Just kidding. Yeah, of course I'll respond. That'd be awesome.
It'll get read.
I think we've gotten one or two. It's been a while. So I'd love to get another email. And then check out the rest of our episodes at crema.us/option5. If you haven't heard of Crema, because you heard that we have saying crema.us and then slash stuff, there's this whole company in front of it. The company that you and I own, Dan. It's incredible.
It's amazing.
It's called Crema. We're a digital product agency that gets to use creativity, technology, and culture to help individuals and organizations thrive. We get the pleasure of building mobile and web apps for some of the most innovative companies in the world. And we'd love to do that with you. So if you've got an idea that you want to prototype and test and validate, we can do that. If you've got a product that you need help building or maybe improving, we can do that. Or if you're just looking for someone to help you to actually improve the way that your team works and make some hard decisions, we get to help people do that as well. So give us a little ring-a-ding. Or you can just fill out the form on our website. That'd be fine too. As you can tell, we love having fun. We love laughing. And the reality is we want to do good work, but we like having fun doing it. So if we can help in any way, don't hesitate to ask. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to this podcast. That is pretty much available in any platform that you choose: Spotify, iTunes, Pocket Cast, Stitcher. I don't really use Stitcher. Anyways, you can subscribe at any of those. And we're going to just keep putting out an episode every single Monday. Or possibly once a week. That day may change. We may decide that Tuesdays are more optimized for some reason.
Or maybe Monday's a holiday. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, that's happened. Yeah. But do subscribe and make sure you share and tell other people to share. And then, write down the podcast on a little sticky note. Put it in an envelope, or do that 15 times. Mini envelopes. Then send out your children into the neighborhood. Tape them to people's doors. If it says no soliciting, don't do it. You don't want to be rude. People don't want that. If it doesn't,
though, there for a reason.
We want your children to be door-to-door salesmen for salespeople for us, for this particular podcast. Anyways, we love doing this. Thanks for listening. And Dan, I'll see you soon, hopefully. Sure. Goodbye.
Cheers.